we have Mike Edrington, who is the editor of a new book, our beautiful book, Relentless Courage. And he's going to talk to us tonight about the book, about the process. And Mike, if you share your screen, we'll get started. Anyone have questions? You could put them in the chat room. And once Mike is done speaking, we could ask him any questions. Again, we thank Epson and Photo Shelter and American Photography and Pro Photo Daily and Archive Magazine for their support. And off we go.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I can't, again, my view is.
View a little one to the left, Mike.
What's that?
Right there. Nope, up. Left.
Okay. I can't see it. It's obscured.
To the left.
All
right there. Nope, left more. Right there.
Yeah, I can't. It's not dropping down for me to.
I'll let you know. Up a higher.
Okay.
Click. Right there.
All right. Let me move. Okay. Now I got it. All right. Hold on. Okay. Okay. So can you all see that?
Yes, we can. You know, first thing, Mike, I see with your list of photographers, so many of them have been have presented with us. Actually, some a few times. So that's sort of fun. Great.
No, it is. Yeah, it is. They're phenomenal photographers. So I'll start off with and then if somebody has questions, the genesis of this book, obviously, the war began in last year ago, February. And the publisher, we're doing a retrospective on Carol Guzzi, her almost 50 years in photojournalism, and the only woman to have won photojournalist to really won 4 Pulitzers in photography. And she was over there covering aspects of the beginning of this war. And we thought maybe we could do something with her. And after some discussion with Carol, it's very narrow when you have one photographer. You got something as big and complicated as an invasion of a country, and as all of you can imagine. And so talking to Carol, we felt that perhaps we could put together a more comprehensive book and a better story arc by using a number of freelancers. Carol explained to me that there were a number over there going hand to mouth trying to document this tragedy. And so I went back to the publisher and I explained that I felt we could do a book, but we would need to do it through we would need to employ a number of photographers in order to do make it a comprehensive effort and to thread this story as it is. And from the start in February, the war in Ukraine actually began in 2014, but this current invasion started a year ago, February, and we wanted to start there with the mass exodus of Ukrainians out of the country. Close to 1 million Ukrainians have left. So many have returned, but going into Poland, Moldova, Finland, I mean, just trying to get out of there. And my photographer said that this is not a war, it's daily terrorism, and it was.
Yeah. So Mike, when you tell that to the publisher, does the onus now fall on you to get all the photographers? How does that work?
Yeah, the onus was on me. I know many of them because I've been doing this for more than 45 years, but some of them I didn't know, and some of them my designer Kate Brainerd became aware of, and I get a name, and then I would want to see the current work, so I would find them, and I would become aware of a photographer like Yesena Maliknowitz. I did not know of her at all, Frank. Amazing photographer in her own right, primarily covering Europe, shooting for the for the Wall Street Journal, some assignments for them on the U.S. side, but for Stern and for others. And very intense visual communications person. She's done TED Talks. She's very analytical about her work and very studious, and she has this Cindy Sherman-esque style. So I'm bringing this up because I hadn't heard of her and I wanted to see the work, and I had her send samples of her work in Ukraine, and it blew me away. And that's when I invited her to be one of the essayists in the book. But I went through a lot of different, I'm not going to name them all, but I went through a lot of really accomplished photojournalists, and some with what they were doing just didn't meet the what we wanted to do in telling in threading this story. You got to remember, we started in February. What things were happening in February, that was already done. I mean, there was a lot of agency, Getty and AP and others, New York Times, and we were capturing that imagery. But now we were starting, hey, what kind of things could we do in order to tell this story living in war? And that's what we tried to accomplish with the essays, living in daily war. And so we covered it through 5 photographers, in addition to using agency and newspaper work that was out there. And you see some of the contributing photographers on the back. This is the back page right here. Tyler Hicks, Alex Kent, Maxim Levin. You get the idea.
I always find it's interesting. Like you think you know so many people, and then there's other people that are doing great work that you just don't know who they are.
Oh, Frank, there's a lot of talent. As you know, it's you got to have a passion. You're not going to get rich being a photojournalist, generally speaking. You have to have a passion and want to do this. You're risking your life to do it, whether you're covering war or covering other things. For the audience's sake, I commanded Army combat camera for almost 3 years. And combat camera is relative. It's everything from actual war to some general shaking hands with a private. So, where you are in that regard depends on where you sit. But there are great photographers out there trying to do this work, and you don't always become aware of them, and they don't always get published, or their work gets minor showing, and it's kind of like being an actor or a musician. I mean, you're trying to get your creativity out there, and not everybody sees it, and it's unfortunate, but you can't publish everything.
Yeah, so. And I'm glad you say it, because sometimes I feel really, really dopey, or because I mean, and someone like you who've been in this business, longer than I have in that space, and you find nuggets. It makes me feel, a lot better, because you just can't know everyone. Yeah,
you can't. You try to be discerning. With this particular book, though, with any of the books that I've done, how it's coming together comes initially, it's a little tenuous, but as it starts to flow, you get an idea of how you're going to, and I say thread the needle or thread the story. And then I start looking at the work that's coming in, and that's when I start talking to either the photographers I've contracted with, or that are working with me, and I know what, and then I start looking for work that's out there that can fill particular holes, and that's how you put it together. And then some photographers, and they were really great, and some of them are well known, and they just didn't have the work. They just did not have the work, and you had to tell them no.
Right.
And you just had to say, hey, I considered you. I reached out to them. I actually reached out. Hey, I know you. I want to see your work. You have a career of success, and they'd send me what they were doing, and it just didn't hold up, and
right.
it didn't fit. And then, hey, but some of them were even gracious. I'd use one picture and pay them for that. And you try to be, you try to be fair and you try to be honest and candid and not cruel about it. Everyone's got pride in their work, and you don't want to demoralize anybody. But and then you got some young photographers like Svet Jacqueline. I mean, I became aware of her through Carol Guzzi. I saw her stuff, and it just, that young woman has, I mean, she has a future that's going to be unprecedented, and she continues.
Yeah. We've had her on a couple of times already.
Yeah.
Too. Okay, go.
So, anyway, so the genesis of the book, as I said, the publisher wanted to do it, and I got to give the publisher great credit, and Blue Star Press, and because it's a risk and there's a lot of cost involved, and Blue Star is a traditional book publisher. They're not, it's not a self-publishing house like that. They work with different artists on different things, everything from sewing to they've done dabbling in kids' books, but they've done a number of books. And this is their first major, really major photography book. And they went all in, and I got to give it to them, hand it to them. And it was a lot of frustration and a lot of risk and a lot of money. And this book was published, was printed in Canada by Graphic Scan. And I only bring that up. We looked in the US because we were wanting to make a publishing deadline, and it needed to be published in North America. We couldn't afford to send it to Mexico or China. Many books, whether they're from Geographic and others, are going to, because in China they do a unbelievable, really great job of printing. And we actually have a printer. Blue Star has a printer down in, I think it's in Guatemala of all places. And they do a fabulous job on these things, and their print quality and reproduction. But we don't have the time. We just didn't have the time. So it had to go to a printer in North America, which is considerably more expensive. But we also wanted the quality. So now you're looking for a printer that has background in doing art books that are in North America, and on the level of a Tashin or Graphis, or you name one of them. And we found Graphiscan out of Canada, and they did a fabulous job with this book and printing it and the reproduction. All my photographers are very happy with how their images look in the book. And that was important to me because I'd hear it if it was terrible. So
That's for sure.
yeah. So we're very happy with that. So that's we were off to the races with the book because the publisher was all in, as I said. And then I went to the SA photographers, as I mentioned. I started asking for work, and Carol was already there because I'd already seen, I'd known her. She's one of my best friends. So I had Carol Guzzi's material, and then it was a matter of finding 4 or 5 others. And we looked, I looked at a lot of material. I looked at thousands of different pictures. I looked at portfolios of work coming out of Ukraine, and trying to, who's doing one thing. Carol had the ladies that stayed. The natural thing are kids. So, I mean, Svet had that. Then there's the death of things, and Paula Bronstein was covering that. And then there's living in that, all that ruin and everything else, and having to do the daily stuff. And that's what Yestina covered. So, and then you had Lindsay Adario that was catching the moments of war. And so I threaded that needle in the center of the book after showing the beginning. And then at the end, we used more agency and newspaper photographers like Tyler Hicks and David Gutenfelder, and different photographers at the end, because they were capturing the actual continuing battle, and we wanted to be able to show that the war's not over. So it was very this was thought out over the 9-month period it took to put this book together. So anyway, I can step through this a little bit, and then if you have questions, let me go back. This we have 3 essays in this book, one written by Ambassador Markarova, Oksana Markarova. I went to her at the Ukrainian embassy and I asked her to do that. Zelensky, that's a kind of a pie in the sky kind of thing. One second here, because I'm getting interrupted. Okay. So she agreed to write the forward. Zelensky was kind of getting overplayed. Naturally, we asked about him, but that kind of didn't, I knew that wasn't going to play out. But fortunately, Ambassador Markarova agreed to write the forward for the book, and we were very grateful for that. She's an amazing woman doing amazing work here in the United States in support of her country. And I was grateful for that. The next person we got was David Hume Kennerly, of President Ford's photographer, won a Pulitzer for his coverage in Vietnam. And he wrote the book. He wrote an essay for the New York Times about that we shouldn't be hiding these pictures and take away the disclaimers about war online. And many of you are familiar, if you get online to like Facebook and some of them, you'll see the sensitive content warnings. And so we made this page in the book as kind of an ode to that, even though the book is pretty graphic in its own right. While I don't believe we're gratuitous with all the dead bodies, we wanted to say something about this sensitivity in contrast to David's essay that was an advocate against such things. And then I have Andrei Kurkov, one of the foremost Ukrainian writers. He's of Russian descent and he speaks 4 or 5 languages: Japanese, Russian. I met with him here in Washington, D.C. Ukrainian, of course, English fluently, French. And he agreed to write an essay, and he's done a number of books in his own right, and he's won the PEN Award, and he agreed to write an essay about being Ukrainian and living in this war, and he did a fabulous job on that. So we wanted that. We wanted the reading audience not only to see the pictures, but to set a kind of a feeling of people really engaged in this, in that environment and in Ukraine and with Ukraine. So that's what we did. So I go on, and these are just some of the pictures that we had, and these are some of the agency pictures that and newspaper pictures that we licensed in order to illustrate the start of the war and what happened. This is the hospital and this woman leaving. You kind of get the idea, but we tried to show the destruction early on and how bad that was. This is a Russian soldier that's done, and some just really profound pictures. This is Alex Kent, St. Michael's Church. It's a very nice opening picture, but gets kind of the graphics. You had Paula Bronstein on yesterday, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of Paula's pictures here.
Yeah.
She's one of the essay photographers. So
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you know, Mike, but your camera is off, so we can't see you. If that's what you want, that's fine.
no, I'm sorry, I didn't know the camera. Let me. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
Here we go. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the pictures. I wasn't paying
Yeah.
attention. Okay, so let me move on here. This is an interesting thing. I wrote a piece, and this is how a book can go. And I'm going to point this out to people. I'm doing it intentionally. There's an error in here in my editor's note because we went back and forth on the cover of the book, and I had one. And you have to be really sensitive because there are country sensitivities and political sensitivities and other things. And we selected an initial picture of a protester that turned out to be an ultra-right Nazi background kind of person. And it was one of Carol Guzzi's pictures. And it was pointed out to me. And we didn't want to contribute to the propaganda. So there was that. We just don't want to contribute to propaganda, period. And the Russians are using that kind of stuff to add to the propaganda. And then we picked another picture one that Guzzi had done of a window of destruction on an apartment building. And then I always had Dmitro Kozovsky's pictures. He's a soldier in the Azov battalion that was holed up in the steel mill in Mariupol and was taken prisoner for 5 months by the Russians. And he made these magnificent pictures, and he did the cover picture. And we wanted that for the cover, but we ran the risk. He was a prisoner of war, and we didn't want to put it on the cover and it publish, and then he gets shot because he's getting more known. And so there are those considerations, and I had to go back at the last minute. He was being freed, and I went back to the embassy, and they said it was cleared to use, and we ended up with that. And Carol was adamant that should be, she was in agreement with it, and we took hers off the cover at the last minute. So in my editor's note, everything applies here, but I mentioned Carol's picture. But right at the last minute, the interior of the book was all printed, and the cover we were holding, and we ended up putting that as the cover because it was the more profound cover. That young man shot that picture. He thought he was going to die, and that is a self-portrait of him. He saw that ray of light, and that was one of the last pictures he took of himself in the plant before he was taken prisoner by the Russians.
Wow.
So we did that, and that decision was made, and the publisher concurred, and we pulled the picture and pulled Carol's and put that on the cover, and was the right thing to do. It just was, and the rest of my note is perfectly applicable. The next thing was the picture to the right is of a Russian T-72 tank. That's a Ukrainian soldier with a Kalashnikov on the turret there, and it's a female soldier. And I wanted that picture next to that's my editorial prerogative, I guess, because I served 31 years in the Army, as I said, doing visual communications, and the Ukrainian. It kind of symbolized for me, and it made the point, I think, of the strength of the and resolve of the Ukrainian people, but that they're all in. They're all in, from the grandmothers that Carol Guzzi photographed to this young female soldier that volunteered and is fighting. And so I thought that was important. And so this picture that was taken by Alex Kent as well.
And Mike, just generally speaking, how many images did you go through to get to this book edit?
Oh, Frank, I wish I kept count. I mean, it was a lot. It was thousands of pictures, because it wasn't just me. You can't do it alone. My daughter, in full disclosure, my daughter's editorial director for Blue Star Press, so she was looking. My fabulous, uncanny designer, Kate Brainerd, worked several years for National Geographic in the book division as a designer. She was helping me. She knows pictures, and she was sending me photographers and sending me pictures. You got to look at this. You got to look at that. I got pictures. I mean, Paula Bronstein. I got pictures from Carol. You got to look at this guy's pictures or this person's pictures. You got to look at people were feeding me things, and you're looking and constantly reviewing, but you got to keep your story is trying to come together. You've got these packages of essays coming in from your 5 essay photographers. You're now down to those and what they're working on, and so you have to you can only take so much. And I have a saying sometimes. In editing pictures, what you throw away can be as important as what you keep, because what you throw away if I love this picture, but it detracts from something else, and you've got to be cognizant of that. So I go on. I just point this out. This is Ambassador Markarova's essay here. We wrote this book. It's in both, if you'll note, it's both in English and Ukrainian. And we did that because we wanted to put people, we felt that the Cyrillic, the Canadian text, not Canadian, I'm sorry, the Ukrainian text added to the environment of the book. It added to the environment and impact of the book. And some might think that's kind of a trite maneuver, but I felt it was important. The Ukrainians really appreciated it. And we weren't working for them. I got to give the embassy credit. They never exercised any editorial oversight over this book. They just gave counsel on where things could go wrong. And I had to make a decision whether we should comply or adjust or whatever, because we didn't want to kill anybody. We didn't want to offend anybody. We wanted to tell the truth as much as we could. This is still a slanted book, no matter how you do it. It's a journalistic effort, but it's slanted. We're not covering the Russian side, and you can't. So there you go. We're not really showing, and I'm not an advocate of that per se, but we're not as balanced as I think we could be, as there's a tendency to want to be, I should say, but it is what it is. So I go on. We needed this. This is another agency picture. This is Zelensky. Obviously, he's always in with the media, and we wanted to show that. And he has led the world in this effort and demonstrated what leadership. This television comedian, right place, right time, stepping up to the plate as president of a country, knowing how to use the media, knowing how to use television, and fundamentally knowing how to lead. And it's a rare quality. And when you least expect it, it happens. And you would never in ordinary life, and I can tell you from a military perspective, people surprise you. They really do. And this man has surprised the world. I'll talk about other pieces of the book, but I wanted to point out this is a personal friend of Ambassador Markarova, but he's also a pretty renowned Ukrainian photographer, Maxim Levin. This is one of the last photographs that he made. And Maxim was captured by the Russians. They tied him up and shot him in the head. And he left a wife and 4 kids. So the sacrifice of photojournalists, and it can be, he did, and he will not be forgotten. So we felt it necessary to include him in the book. This is David Kinnerly's piece, Photographing Hell. And then Andrei Kirchhoff. So now you get into, this is the part of the lead up, Frank, as I mentioned, the start of the war. Some of Carol's picture of the eye coming out, that was published in the New York Times. And then the Russian soldier in the snow. Dario's picture of the family and the friend that crossed the bridge, that were all killed at once, all the kids, mom, and the friend. And we left the section with this one, this sad woman. I mean, just why is this happening? And then some of you might recognize this. This is the young woman that was pregnant and gave birth, and then both her and her child died later in this hospital. There's Irpa, and this is by Paula Bronstein. She got a drone and the destruction of our apartment building. This is some of Paula's. We included this. This looks like a smashed car, the photograph on the left. What that sign says is that there's a body there. And then to the right is the world's largest airplane that was destroyed. It happened to be in Ukraine. I didn't know that, but we included it. The destruction's unprecedented. It's just unbelievable. And then trying to cover the exodus and the initial burials and those kinds of things. I want to point this out. This picture taken by Maximilian Clark, the face of this young girl, you're going to kind of see this on this distant, lost face on people. It's a commonality that you're starting to see in the Ukrainian people and their reaction, and their living in this war. I see it in many of the pictures, and so it's disturbing in its own right. It's almost as disturbing as looking at bodies. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
Yeah, and then we can put it in the chat room if you like. And Mike, so you're going through the edit, you're getting all these images from around the world. What keeps you focused with this being inundated with images? Do the people who are helping you, your daughter and other people, the designer, is everyone grabbing some of the images and then you narrow them down? Just if as you go through them, if you could just give us a sense of the process.
Yeah, there's no I in team. Yeah, the images are coming in. Yeah, the advantages, I mean, it's all online. I mean, we most of the images, I mean, it's all electronic, so we put them in folders, and then I go through and I do my initial edit, and then I'd have Kate do an edit, and then Lindsay would naturally, my daughter would participate some, and then the publisher would even see something. Hey, what about this? And you take a look, and then again, I go back and look, okay, this is the front part of the book, is the lead into the war and the mass exodus and the bodies. And you're seeing some of that here, and trying to get on trains and leaving your families behind, and kids being put on trains. And you can only, there's a lot of these, how many of you have seen pictures of the hand up on the window? I mean, it's a pretty common picture from Ukraine, and I can't publish 50 of them. I can do one, and then it becomes kind of that picture becomes kind of cliche. You want it to stand out. It's poignant, but how can you do it? And so we kind of did this with the teddy bear kind of thing, and you try to be balanced, but you try to be somewhat discerning, and what communicates that moment of these kids leaving their home on a train, and so you get it, and what communicates people packed into a train, and you have to get that, and people living in train stations. I want to go back here, and people in the subways and the trains going up steps, and in the meantime they're burying family members, and it's living in war and living in hell. We needed to show that the Ukrainians are very much into their pets. It's their animals mean a lot to them, and we needed it. It's incredible. I own a dog, but I'm not as, Americans love their pets too, but not like this. I mean, they give up their own lives for their dog. I mean, we needed to show that, and we did. So this, I'm getting into the first essay, picking the essayist, as I said, that was its own process. And I'm going to say this now because I haven't mentioned it. The 5 essayists are all women. I did not pick them because they were women or try to take advantage of that. It was because they were the best on the ground at the time, covering what they were covering that met our story objectives in the book. And then they were available, and that's where the critical, and then I looked seriously at their work and what they were covering, and how they would contribute and participate in the book. And all of these photographers did that. And then, to their credit, I could have marketed, we could have marketed this book, 5 of the best female journalists, blah, 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 and done that. And people do that. That was not what we wanted to do. And, I asked Lindsay Adario, how do you want this seen? Do you want it seen as a great photographer or a great woman photographer, and it's great photographer, and of course, and so that's what they did. And we didn't market, the book's not being marketed that way. It's being marketed as to show the destruction and toll on Ukraine and the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And that's what it's designed to do. And I think it does it very well. So we get into Carol's essay here, and Frank, I know she presented, but if people want me to explain these essays, I can. These are the ladies that stayed. They're called babushkas, which is Ukrainian for grandmother. And they're either ladies that refused, they didn't want to leave. This was their home. They didn't know where to go, or they had nowhere to go. And so they were pretty much there on their own. There were some relief agencies that came in and gave food and tried to contribute, and sometimes some family members, but most of the time they were on their own for the bombing and having to go underground and live underground.
And Mike, were they alone together, or they're separate from each other?
Some of them were, they knew each other and would come together out in the street when they were getting food and stuff. But a lot of times it's kind of funny when you look at the pictures. They just stayed to themselves. I mean, they would come together in moments, but like this lady was with her cats, and they were just by themselves, particularly at night. This lady's going into the bunker there, and
fiercely independent, right?
They were. I mean, and then getting the food, you had to show that. But then there's the woman coming back into her apartment for a few moments and hugging her bed, and they're alone. And then some of them aren't. I mean, they have family members that try to, or they're married, and the husband's trying to console her. And
we met her the other night.
It's an ugly war. This is Yesena Meleknowitz. Life in the Ruins is what this is about. And just they continue to live. They go to the store. The Ukrainian people, they maneuver around this as best they can. And I can't imagine, and I've been to war. I have been, but the having to live in it day to day, I could leave. They can't, and so that's kind of a selfish thing, but it's the reality.
The thing that always amazes me from all the images that we've seen is how after something happens, they immediately clean up.
They do.
Yeah. Just amazing. Like, I mean, look at that shot. I mean,
they're trying to live their lives and go on. I mentioned to you the face of that young girl. So now you see, maybe you get a sense of what I'm talking about here. There's more of that.
So Mike, how does that happen? You're speaking about these photographs with an intimacy like you took them. I mean, that is I mean, does that normally happen for the editor to become so close to them that it's as if you took them?
The answer is my passion for photography and photojournalism is every bit as much as any other photographer. That's how I came up as a photographer, and I kind of evolved into putting books together, and on two of my other books I also shot. I contributed to them, and so when you ask that question, Frank, I was adamant about this book treating my photographers with, and you notice I said my photographers, treating them with respect. We had a lot of heated arguments, particularly Carol and I, because I love her dearly and we're so personal that she'll beat me up. But the point is that you have to have care for their images. You really do. Because they have care for their images. And then you have to get a grasp of the intimacy of the image. And these photojournalists, these photographers I work with are the best in the world. And so you have to get, when you're talking Carol Guzzi and Lindsay Addario and Paula Bronstein, you have to have care for that. Can you hold on 1 second? I do need to take this.
This is live TV, folks, and a call's coming in probably from Carol Guzzi. She heard him talking, and she's coming after him. I'm more afraid of Paula than I am of Carol, I have to say. Yeah, and again, guys, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat room and fire away. Yeah, what an incredible task to put something like this together. And it's also intriguing how so many of the photographs we've seen over the time, with all the photographers presenting with us. But yeah, he speaks of with an intimacy that's really amazing.
Yeah, thank you. There's
Your
really,
camera's off again, Mike.
yeah, there's fabulous editors out there. I mean, just Michael Ducille was one of my best friends, director of photography at Washington Post, passed away a few years back. But I've learned from some of the best and consulted and then I had, they're really great photographers working on the book, and you get their feedback and where they want their story to go, and they know what they want, and then you start working with it, and then deciding which pictures you're going to use, and it comes together. Again, I use the word organically. It does, and then my visual aptitude has been developed over time. And some I know really great photographers, they just have this innate aptitude. The timing, like Carol, the timing between her head, heart, and shutter finger is unprecedented. And then and Svet, and I can name others, Michael Williamson, who works for the Washington Post, if someone wants to look him up, like a Walker Evans, unbelievable. And then guys like me, photographers like me, I'm a great journeyman photographer that came up over time and learned with experience and hard work and listening and learning, and that's where it comes from. So the reverence for the image is really great, and the reverence has to be for the image in relation to the audience. So you can quote me on that. There's an audience that's going to see this, and what are they going to receive, and what are they going to get out of it? And everyone takes a little bit of something different out of it, but overall, it's the destruction toll on Ukraine and the resilience of the Ukrainian people, and that needs to come through that theme, and I think it does. So again, I mentioned the face. I mentioned it earlier, that young girl. So you kind of get the idea. So you kind of see the face here,
Yep.
kind of there. You really have to study this picture to see it. You kind of have the face here lost in the distance. Right here, this great picture by Svet.
Lost in the Distance by 51B on Spotify. You can always ask me to
I'm sorry about that.
Your choice.
Yeah, I got some music playing in the background. It heard me. All right.
You're right, Hal.
So you kind of get the idea. Svet went up to the Polish border to take a picture of that. Can you turn that off or whatever it is? I don't know where it's coming from. Yeah. Probably coming from the iPad. Yeah. Sorry about that, Frank.
No, that's all right.
Apologize to the audience there.
Yeah.
Okay. So you that was all the kids, and the impact and toll on the kids. I can't imagine. They're going to be scarred for years. This is in a castle in Poland, and that's where that trampoline was, and they were being evacuated out of Ukraine, trying to get some of them out. And now, unfortunately, there's a whole story with the Russians just kidnapping kids. But you asked me if there may be another book. I don't know where it'll go, Frank. I really don't. It's just the next thing. I gotta wait. You see the face here. It's just this thing. So this is by Paula Bronstein, and she did a great job on this.
Yeah, so Mike, I mean, with the intimacy that you have now of these images, because I always ask the photographers, what do they do to decompress? What do you do? I mean, you're looking at thousands of images that really aren't pleasant. How do you, sort of get yourself some relief as well?
I don't have any, how do I say it, particular romantic notion about it's not that I haven't, I've actually seen it. I've been there. I've been shot at. It doesn't affect me that I'm aware of the same way that some of these really great, like I mentioned Carol Guzzi. She feels everything. I mean, the empathy that she feels when she's photographing something is unprecedented, and it's part of what makes her pictures so good. It's for me, I start to get detached after a while, but again, I was a soldier for 31 years, and I'm not, it sounds like an excuse, but I've seen so much of it. It just goes. I don't have a better way to explain it. It's not that I don't recognize the horror of it. Don't think for 1 minute, or that I approve. And, I'm not a big gun advocate here at all. It's just, these are people in body bags, and there are people in those bags, and the horror of that is huge, and I recognize it. But you feel removed, and that's part of the reason of the book. I mean, these images of bodies are fleeting when you're online or on television, and some of these images you've seen them on television news, and because a couple of morning shows, have done stories on the photographers over there, and like that. But those pictures are fleeting, and that's hopefully with the book you can sit down and really digest it, and that's what I want. And you're right. I mean, I'm able to digest the gravity of what the Russians are doing. And so, and I guess in a long-winded answer, I see the dysfunction of the Russian military. They have no command and control. They've lost the moral high ground, so to speak. They don't have any, and because of what you're seeing here. And the purpose of this book, to bring the toll on Ukraine to awareness. This is not a war. It is daily terrorism. And that's my opinion. This is Lindsay Adario's work. Can you imagine being this woman? You're in your apartment, and this, it's just unprecedented.
So in Lindsay's case, does she have to get approval from the New York Times that you could put these in this publication? How does that
No,
work? for her?
her agreement, we're very careful with rights. We're very careful with rights. She owns rights to her imagery. She has her contract deal. She owns
Yeah, I mean, I don't need intimate details. I'm just saying, I'm
No.
just wondering how that works.
It depends. It depends on the photographer. Intellectual property rights for your audience are very serious. As you know, Frank, I took it very serious. And there's not one image in this book that is not licensed. Not one image. So, and in some cases, the photographer was Ukrainian or Polish or, from some other country, and I had to find and they'd be from some agency I hadn't heard of before, and you have to find it and track it down if you wanted to use it. And we did that. And so with Lindsay, it was a straight up, hey, would you be in the book? And she agreed graciously, and we did a contract with her, and that's how it worked. I was very adamant that all my photographers were compensated fairly and equitably, and some of them would have done it for free.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So that's it. The publisher is probably going to take a huge loss on the book, but the purpose is, again, the destruction and toll and resilient thing that I mentioned, and we're contributing, and we gave so that your audience knows, we gave 600 books to the Ukrainian embassy so that the ambassador we donated those books, and the ambassadors presented one book to every member of Congress to keep it in the forefront. So that's, it's to try to aid the cause, so to speak.
Yeah. And Mike, as you look back, you're happy with the design of the book, that whole process?
I was. Kate's, as I mentioned, she's a heck of a designer. There's some things in the design I would have done a little bit differently.
That's always right.
Yeah, the type size bugs the hell out of me, but I got argued down. Blue Star, a lot of the type is always 10 point. And that's what they do. And then the designer, Kate wanted 10 point, and so we went 10 point, and now it bugs me, and we should have gone to 12. But it's still a great book. It reads well, and it's okay.
I imagine each book that you put together, there's always something, right?
There is.
Right.
I go on about, but now I'll give you the argument against the bigger type. Is it about the pictures, or is it about the type?
Yeah.
I've seen it where photographers do their captions, and the type's so big, your eye goes straight to the caption before the picture. So you gotta look at it. So yeah, I looked at that, but I had one of the best designers in the world. So there you go. I think this was done by Finbar O'Reilly, but I can't see. Oh, sorry. Go back here. I way overleapt where I wanted you to be so you could see it. Ukrainian soldier and a Russian soldier. The Russians are dying. These young men are just being thrown at the war. They're undertrained, poor leadership, and just put out there to die.
Yeah, Mike, somebody asked, how big is the book?
204 pages.
Yeah, and at some point you got to put in the chat room where people can purchase it.
Okay. Yeah.
In terms of size, is it 11 by 14?
9.5 by 11.
There you go, George. I hope that does it. 9.5 by 11. Okay.
And they can get it on Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, Target, Walmart. They're all selling it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So this was Finbar. We did some great stuff in the. That one's not, but I love this picture. This is Dimitro, the young soldier I mentioned. Now this is the plant in Mariupol, and these men were fighting with after their arms were amputated. They still fought. It's just, and what they were protecting, there were women and children in there, and finally the Russians let them go, and then these guys were taken prisoner. And then that's Dimitro's picture. That's also on the cover. And then those are my 5 essay photographers. If people want to read about them, it's in the book. And then we concluded the book with Paula Bronstein's lovely picture. It's a beautiful picture. It's a destroyed apartment building, but it's kind of a symbol of hope with the rainbow.
Yeah, she was telling us about that the other night, how she went back to get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have our acknowledgments and things like that. So I can take, I don't see the chat room where that is.
Yeah, Jay, open up if anyone wants to ask a question, undo everyone's mics. So
Hey, Mike, I put the links on Amazon and Barnes and Noble in the chat room for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Being technically deficient here with Zoom. Yeah. So if anyone, if you have a question about doing a book, as I said, this is my third. They're difficult. The first one I did was with National Geographic, called Where Valor Rests, Arlington National Cemetery. That became a New York Times bestseller. And then the second one I did was internally published, actually, and funded by the military, but we printed more than 5,000 copies. It was called For Children of Valor, for the kids that lost loved ones and at war. And
yeah,
so
the beyond the size of the type, the conversation around what type to use.
That was with Kate. We went with what was readable and what kind of gave. It's a feeling, okay? A type is a feeling. It really is, and this is my opinion. Okay, you have a feeling in conjunction with the overall book. You want a certain solemnness to the book, and you don't want the type to be too gregarious, so to speak. We looked at cover type, for instance. You could use the MASH military look. We looked at that. We didn't want that. And so you look for a type that gives kind of a balance, and there's got to be a consistency, because the type adds to the brand of the book. It's a subtle brand, but it adds to the brand. So you carry it consistent throughout. And so then we tried to do that. Other than maybe the headline, if you notice the header here is a little different, but you get the idea. And I can't remember what the type name is. Don't ask me, because I don't remember right now.
Mm-hmm. And is it easy to let go, Mike? When you press the button and said, we're done?
No, because now you're thinking, it's like the cover. You're pushed into the last minute. And fortunately, we had that latitude a little bit. That's why the cover got changed. But in terms of it's gone to press at a certain point, you have no choice. Everything, it is done. It's being printed, and that's it. I mean, in this case, it was kind of funny. we pushed the edges a little bit, but in making sure the art was right, making sure pictures were adjusted. The color correction on the images was extremely important.
Yep.
To me, to Kate. I did some of the color correction working with our colorist, Mike Dixon, because as you all know, color workflow can shift from computer to computer, press to computer, and trying to make sure that it was absolutely consistent so that what the photographer saw when we were editing is what was, and what we finally agreed to would be printed on the page. But even then, once it's printed on, and we had magnificent paper, once it was printed on the page, it still has its shift to it. So we got color, we got color profiles, and we got press proofs and all that before we went final.
So Mike, from when I want to do a book to having the book in your hand, how long is that process?
You want to do a book.
And now the book is in your hand.
The first thing I say is good luck. And this book was incredibly fast, 9 months. This took 9 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Where Valor Rests took 2 years. The one that I did. You have to look at what is the book communicating. So completely different books. So, but for your audience purpose, to give you some semblance. So Where Valor Rests, and that book's in its third printing. That's about Arlington National Cemetery. There are 300,000 families behind every headstone there. So you have a huge audience. You have veteran service organizations. You have all these things that are a natural audience that grows into it. And so you have to be comprehensive in how you're going to cover that cemetery, and you can't do it in a year. You're covering every season. Okay. You're covering the care and concern. So you make a shot list and a story list and how that's all going to be covered. This war is unpredictable. Okay. It is unpredictable. It's chronological. You have the beginning to where the book ends, but the war's not over at the end. And it's a little more, each is complicated in its own way. And I would say this was harder to cover in 9 months than Where Valor Rests was to do in 2 years. I had time to do it. We could go back and reshoot certain things. There's a lot of ceremony there. That was easy. This had photographers at risk, and I would talk to them. Svet went up to the front lines and almost got herself killed. And then a few days later, she was on a train to cover something, and I was up on the phone with her for 3 hours, getting cut off and on from bad cell service, trying to talk her down from her own PTSD as she's going to cover another assignment. She was scared. She was just scared. She just turned 30. She's a young photographer. Yeah. And how am I going to get her through this? Different, just different, but two different purposes, and they each had a purpose. I got to stress the purpose. If you're going to do a book, you ask how long. The best advice I can give people, there are photographers that have come to me, I want to do a book, and they want to do a vanity book. Well, then get your pictures, we'll do an edit, and you can self-publish. But to get a publisher to buy in, it has to have a purpose. Where's the audience? What's your audience going to be? And who's going to buy it? And you have to look at it.
What's next, Mike?
Do
we do a follow-up book?
The next book is Carol Guzzi's. We're doing her retrospective. And the target, there's a target for that book, and it's libraries and learning and institutions, journalism schools, and others. And she's an icon, and then the photographic community into itself. So there's an audience there for that book, and we're going to do it, but it'll be a small press run. It won't be huge. And then I have another idea for a book that's international. but I'm not going to go into what that is now. And it's a conflict related book that I've been approached about, but it doesn't mean it's going to get done either. It just doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And is there a follow-up to Relentless Courage?
I don't know. It depends on where this war turns. Hopefully it doesn't go beyond Ukraine and we can finish
My
it.
God.
It's not a question about whether Ukraine will win or not. It's when they win, because the NATO and the European Union isn't going to let it go beyond where it is. I mean, it's just unless the Russians push it further, and then we'll be into something we don't want. And then that brings up something. But I can tell you this. The war will end eventually in Ukraine. And then there's a reconstruction period. So it's not over. And how are you going to rebuild this country? It's bigger than the Marshall Plan. You've got hundreds and hundreds of years of destruction, and you're not going to rebuild that country in a year. And they're not going to be able to do it by themselves. And so there's another story there in the reconstruction and the rebuilding of Ukraine.
Right.
And the repatriation of refugees and families and all of that, because the Ukrainians, my experience with them, they're very patriotic now. This war has emboldened them. They have a Russian background. A lot of them do, but they identify with their country. They really identify with their country. Period.
Yeah. No, that yeah. You'd have to be blind not to recognize that after all this this year. So, any other questions for Mike? Mike, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving us this insight. This was really, really terrific. And I'm sure you're going to have a couple of offers by the end of the week of guys who want to do books.
Yeah.
So I apologize about that.
Yeah, happy to advise. Books are hard. It's hard. They're not. Everyone wants to do one. Every photographer, all I can tell you is that you're better off if you've got a book, if it has a purpose, that's going to garner some result, then you have a better chance of being published and potential sales. But you got to convince the publisher of that, to take the risk.
Yeah, I mean, if we get nothing else out of tonight, it's about purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've said that 1,000 times. So we really appreciate it. We appreciate your time very much. All of Mike's information of where to get the book is in the chat room for everyone. I encourage everyone to buy one or a couple for your friends and family. And Mike, you always have a platform here for whatever's coming next. And we'd love to have you back. And I'm going to reach out to you because I need some of those emails of some of those folks that I've been trying to reach them, for projections. So I'll contact you for a few names.
Okay. Okay.
I
want to say thanks to your audience for sticking with me as I ramble through this.
I think every one of us, even certainly me, and the other seasoned veterans here, all gained something, all learned something tonight. So yeah, I mean, everyone's is very, very thankful, and that was terrific. And like always, tomorrow we have another presenter on, Marian Stab, who's also been in Ukraine photograph. We've been doing a whole week of these mics.
Right.
But what I'd like to do is, if you could give us the send off for the evening, that would be great.
Yeah, my only send off to all you guys that are photographers is the camera's not a flak jacket. I said that to all my photographers. You get absorbed in the viewfinder and you forget what's going on around you, and what's going on around you is a war. So when you're in conflict photography, the camera is not a flak jacket. And I tell that to all my photographers. So there you go. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No better words than that. Mike, really, thank you very much. Be safe. And, we thank you for your time.